Right, in a joint statement with France and Canada, the Prime Minister threatened Israel today with concrete actions if it keeps restricting aid into Gaza. And both he and the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, reiterated this message in Parliament earlier today.
As set out in my statement with President Macron and Prime Minister Carney last night, we repeat our demand to massively scale up humanitarian assistance into Gaza.
For 11 weeks, Israeli forces have blockaded Gaza, leaving the World Food Programme without any remaining stocks. Therefore, today, I'm announcing that we have suspended negotiations with this Israeli government on a new free trade agreement. End this blockade now and let the aid in.
The UK this afternoon suspended free trade agreements, or negotiations rather, with Netanyahu's government, urging the end to all aid restrictions. So is this the right thing to do? Do you agree with the UK government this afternoon? Going head to head on this now are the journalist and broadcaster Angela Epstein and the trade unionist Steve Headley. Good evening to you both. Thank you for waiting there. Appreciate your patience.
Good evening.
Angela, I'll come to you first. Ladies first, what's your take on what's happened today?
Well, Hamas have issued a statement welcoming the move by the UK government. So we're now in a position whereby this government is being applauded and praised for helping Hamas. Every time it does something against Israel, a democratically elected government, a Western democracy, or hitherto our ally, who is involved in a war that it didn't want. And let's remember, we framed this by the atrocities of October the 7th, in which over 1,300 people were murdered. People were brutalized and raped, and a war Israel did not want. I was there on October the 7th. On October the 6th, the country was going about its business. So remember, Israel did not want this. So every time Hamas hears this kind of hogwash from the British government or anywhere else, they get sucker from it. They think how fantastic. It strengthens and emboldens them. And remember, it's seen almost as a reward for Hamas. Now, Israel does not want to fight with the ordinary people of Gaza, the innocent people of Gaza. Every innocent death is one too many. And if Hamas secrete itself in buildings such as schools and hospitals, etc., then innocent people get killed. Now, the reason that Israel withheld its aid was not in order to starve Gaza as part of its instrument of war. It's because the aid was being purloined by Hamas. It was found in Sinwar's lair. And also, where is it going, the aid that does get through? When you've seen Hamas operatives and fighters releasing the hostages, do those Hamas fighters look skinny? Do they look, and where are they getting the energy and the money to fire rockets? Ordinary people may well be suffering, and we don't want that. But Israel feared that the aid was
I'm going to bring Steve in, Angela. Sorry, because we're pushed for time. Apologies, because I went over. It's my fault. We went over on the last segment. But Steve, your contributions, please.
Well, let's just forget everything that happened since 1948, the Nakba, the occupations in 1967, the stealing of a Palestinian land after that, the starvation, the massacre of 20,000 Palestinian children. What should Israel have done on October the 7th, Steve? 53,000 Palestinians. Let's forget that, and let's just frame it from the 11th of October. Why don't we do that? Because it's a ridiculous narrative. Now, what they've done
you can't
today
even get the date right.
I didn't interrupt you. Be quiet. I didn't interrupt you. Be quiet.
Sorry, Steve. Sorry, Steve. I won't have you speaking to people like that on my show, especially not Angela.
Well, you're not. You continually interrupted me. She had a tirade.
It's a conversation, Steve. It's a conversation.
Well, look, let me speak. What we had today is too little, too late. People are literally starving to death in Gaza. The International Committee for the Red Cross has said that. Amnesty International have said that. The United Nations have said that. This is nothing to do with Hamas. If the IRA had secreted themselves in hospitals in West Belfast, we would have not destroyed West Belfast. That wouldn't have happened.
Well, it is something to do with Hamas because they released a statement today.
If the Israeli army secreted themselves in hospitals in Jerusalem and Hamas bombed those hospitals, it would be a war crime, the same as it is a war crime when these hospitals and schools.
All right, Steve, last word to you, please, Angela.
The Palestinians are being ethnically cleansed now.
Israel,
within days, actually, of Russia invading the Ukraine.
Got it, Steve.
It disturbs me that you think
But we
Steve.
see this
It
genocide.
disturbs-
Get him off. Sorry, I'm finished. Angela, last word to you, please. Get Steve off,
It
please.
disturbs me that my opponent here thinks so little of what happened to Israel and the hostages still lying there that he couldn't even get the date right and said October the 11th instead of October the 7th. Hamas need to lay down their arms. They need to stop. Israel does not need to live with a genocidal neighbour. It's right to defend itself. We don't want people affected in Gaza. We don't want innocent people to starve. The aid has to go to where it's going to be used. But if Israel was concerned that it was going to get into the hands of terrorists and it wouldn't go to those people, that's why it stopped it.
OK, thank you both for your company. It's been great. Thanks very much. See you. Now, is your teenage child being taught about inspirational British victories in history lessons? Well, it seems it's likely, unfortunately, they're not. A new survey has found only 11% of UK secondary schools are teaching students about battles of Waterloo and Trafalgar, despite, of course, their vital roles in the history of the British Empire. However, almost all children are learning about the transatlantic slave trade and British colonisation. So, is a focus on historical events such as these teaching youngsters to be ashamed of Britain and its past? Well, joining me now is the historian and broadcaster Rafe Haydel-Mancu. Rafe, good evening. Thank you for your company. Good to see you. What's your take on this? Why are we learning, or why are children learning about the slave trade and the horrors of the empire and not great British victories in history?
Yeah, there's such a disturbing and deeply alarming state of affairs in our schools. You know, after the death of George Floyd and the whole Black Lives Matter protests in around 2020, more than 80% of schools decided they were going to, diversify and decolonize their curriculums. And they allowed themselves essentially to be influenced by anti-British activists and their propaganda. As a result of that, the history that's being taught in our schools, I'm afraid to say, is grossly politicized. And it's led to the rise not only of biased history, but in many cases, we're seeing fake history. And that's being sustained, I'm afraid to say, also by a teaching profession which is increasingly ignorant and isn't actually aware of the nonsense that they're spouting. So as you've said, Britain's great achievements, its proud legacy is being downplayed. In many cases, it's being actually suppressed, as with Waterloo and so forth. So our children aren't being taught about the Glorious Revolution, about the Battle of Waterloo, or our role in abolishing slavery. Instead, they're taught increasingly bizarre stuff. They're taught now, I kid you not, that Stonehenge was built by black people, and by black they mean sub-Saharan Africans. And they're also taught that the African slave kingdoms, who were the ones who actually enslaved Africans and sold them to Europeans, that they are somehow not guilty of any involvement in the slave trade. What's going on, really, is that our history is being erased and it's being rewritten in order to propagate a completely new and baseless ideology that Britain's a nation of immigrants, that has always been multicultural, that its great achievements were minimal, and that what it did achieve was only thanks to the involvement of non-Britons, and that diversity built Britain, and ultimately that that Britain and the West are uniquely evil, I would say. And it's all obviously absolute nonsense, of course.
So, I mean, it's a silly question, I guess, but is this intentional? Is there an agenda at play? And if so, I think the answer is yes. Why? What is the agenda and who's behind it?
Well, anybody who lived under Chinese or Eastern European communist rule, this will all sound very eerily familiar. Severing the connections that link a people to their past destroys the roots that ultimately ground all of us to our place. And knowledge of history is crucial to instilling in our youth a sense of identity, of belonging, and of place. And if you want to undermine that society, if you want to demoralize and destabilize its society, you attack its history and you rewrite it.
Yeah.
And so as a result of that, we're producing a generation of children who are not only woefully ignorant of history, they're actually susceptible to this bias and fake history. And the polling shows it. In 2004, 80% of young Britons 18 to 24 were proud to be British. Today, it's only 40%. And it's only going to take another two or three more decades to have the majority of the working age population of this country, including people in power, who are not only ignorant of this nation's history and its, its achievements, but quite frankly, despise Britain and its past. And that's deeply troubling. I like to say always, a nation ignorant of history is like a man with no memory. And that's how you can easily foist upon it a new ideology, an ideology where minorities have always been present.
Yeah, Rafe, you're so right. I looked up at the fly past on VE Day. I saw the Typhoons, the Lancaster and so on. And you know, I felt the emotion in me. I felt like I was in the footsteps and the shadows of my ancestors who came before me. And people who come to this country in later generations cannot resonate with that. Likewise, me going to Japan and, you know, doing the same thing there. These are our history. It's our history. It's our people. It's our nation. And I think you speak quite eloquently on that. Thank you, Rafe Hedel Manku, for your company. A spokesperson for the Department of Education said high and rising standards are at the heart of the government's mission to break down the barriers to opportunity and give every child the best start. The independent expert-led curriculum and assessment review is considering how to ensure young people have access to a broad and balanced curriculum that ensures young people leave school ready for work and ready for life. There we go.